Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Devin Shanahan Show. So today I want to take the time with a lot of this stuff coming up about the election and potential fraud and things like that. I want to take the time to talk about Hammer and Scorecard. These are two secret CIA projects that started as essentially counterterrorism projects and have morphed and been weaponized by the United States government, and essentially they're claimed to be used to manipulate our own elections. I'm not saying that any of this is verified and true and accurate, but there are extremely reputable people who whistleblew on this and are saying that this is absolutely true. Whether or not it was used in this election, I do not know. But, excuse me, but we have whistleblowers saying that this was used in Florida, I believe, in the 2012 election as kind of a test run for Obama. And this has been used in foreign countries' elections as well to try to influence them in a manner that helps the United States. So, let's get into it. We have an article here on the AmericanReport.org. It's by Mary Fanning and Alan Jones. It was written October 31st, 2020. Reason I point that out is because this was written before the election. A lot of the articles and videos you will see on Hammer and Scorecard today where essentially they came out 2 or 3 days after the election when all the hype started up. But these people, Mary Fanning especially, has been doing excellent reporting on this, investigative journalism on this topic and many other topics for a number of years now, almost a decade. And you can find all of her stuff. It's mainly about whistleblower stuff and American intelligence community and things like that. Some of the darker secrets of the U.S., you might say. And you can find all of her stuff on the AmericanReport.org. I suggest reading this site. Some of the articles are quite lengthy, so you got to have a little bit of extra time on your hands to get into it, but they're definitely worth reading. But today we're just going to go over the Hammer and Scorecard article, talk a little bit about it. I'm not saying that any of this is proved to be true. I do believe that it has been proven that these programs do exist and can be used for elections. In fact, they were designed to be used for elections. And yeah, let's just jump right in. Enough of me. Biden using Scorecard and the Hammer to steal another U.S. presidential election, just like Obama and Biden did in 2012, by Mary Fanning and Alan Jones. In February 2009, the Obama administration commandeered a powerful supercomputer system known as the Hammer. The Hammer includes an exploit application known as Scorecard that is capable of hacking into elections and stealing the vote, according to CIA contractor turned whistleblower Dennis Montgomery, who designed and built the Hammer. The whistleblower tapes, confidential audio recordings released by U.S. District Judge G. Murray Snow's courtroom in November 2015, revealed that Scorecard was deployed by the Obama team against Florida election computers to steal the 2012 presidential election on behalf of President Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. So, right here, right off the bat, right? And I have not fact checked this. I have not looked at these actual courtroom releases. I do not even know if they are out there. But essentially, these whistleblower tapes were audio recordings, and they were from a court case in 2012 that alleged that this program, the Scorecard. Now, let's clarify one thing. Scorecard is a program, a software program, and the Hammer is essentially some sort of like artificial intelligence computer system, or some sort of it's essentially just a supercomputer system, right? That so they use the Hammer and to run the Scorecard at like a super high rate of speed, tons of processing power on this huge network that can process tons of different data and signals intelligence all at one time. And essentially during this trial, during this courtroom case, it was essentially used as evidence. They had provided evidence that this was used. And a lot of these federal court cases are sealed. Some of these documents are sealed because they may involve classified information. And this case, I believe that is the reason, because these programs were obviously classified at the time and still are classified, I'm sure, but have been leaked a little bit. And yeah, so proof of this is very evident from this court case. So let's go on. Scorecard is now being activated to steal the vote on behalf of Joe Biden once again. Biden utilized the Hammer and Scorecard while running for vice president in 2012. Votes are again being stolen on Biden's behalf as he runs for president of the United States in 2020. Now, mind you, this was written on October 31st, so before the election. This time, Scorecard is stealing votes in Florida, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona, according to Montgomery. Dennis Montgomery is the CIA contractor who designed the Hammer, the program, and I'm sure he had a ton of involvement in designing Scorecard as well. So, be mindful, Dennis Montgomery, since he is a whistleblower, I'm assuming he is no longer involved or in depth in these. He no longer has in-depth involvement in these programs, but I'm sure he still knows people in these programs and still, and when he designed it, he obviously knew what the intent of the program was. And he is saying that it was used in Florida, or going to be used in Florida, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, and Arizona. Interesting enough, some of those states, Georgia, Texas, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona. Arizona was a state that was supposed to be red. Wisconsin and Michigan was states that stopped the counting and essentially at like midnight. And then all of a sudden they waited for like 3 hours and then a bunch of votes flipped for Biden, only Biden, large numbers. Pennsylvania as well. Texas, the Democrats kept talking like they were going to take it. Georgia was one of those other states that stopped. Then all of a sudden you see a ton of votes coming up in Atlanta, essentially. It's also interesting that all of these major Democratic-run cities in the states that I just mentioned were using a voting software called Dominion. Most of the other counties in the states were not using this voting software. And believe it or not, this Dominion voting software was pushed by a relative of Nancy Pelosi. One of her relatives owns a company that created this voting software. And it was, essentially, it was paid for, funded, and put forward in part by the Clinton Foundation. So, I'm not saying this is evidence, but it certainly smells fishy and deserves looking into, right? Let's go on. Scorecard steals elections by tampering with the computers at the transfer points of state election computer systems and outside third-party election data vaults as votes are being transferred. So what that means is you go in to cast your vote, right? Whether you write it down on paper or you vote on the electronic machine, okay? The vote is then essentially, if you vote on the computer system, that vote is then taken from the computer at the local precinct and sent over a network, essentially, to some sort of database that tabulates all the votes in the entire state. And what this is saying is that Scorecard does some sort of like man-in-the-middle attack, you could think of, where it, in between where the voting precinct is and the database that counts all the votes together, when they're sending that vote to be counted, to add to the database to count to the total, Scorecard jumps in there and manipulates that to either change it or modify it in some way, right? So that's why it's largely undetectable, because unless you're checking the vote on the voter side and also the database side, you're not going to notice it. Most of these votes are checked only on the voter side. If they look at the vote, they verify that it's true, and then they put it in the machine to like scan it or whatever it does and send it off to the database. People aren't checking it on the database as well. And that's why this Scorecard program is largely undetectable. Let's go on. Scorecard uses a prismatic scoring algorithm that Montgomery created to achieve the desired results by those that control the Hammer and Scorecard. In Florida, one of the transfer points is VR Systems Incorporated, based in Tallahassee. Software vendor VR Systems operates in 8 U.S. states. The Democrats tested their technology during the Democrat Party primaries. Otherwise, Bernie Sanders would have won the 2020 nomination. Scorecard was utilized on behalf of Joe Biden during the 2020 primary against Bernie Sanders. The Democratic primary was stolen from Bernie Sanders. CIA whistleblower, that's totally plausible, right? I mean, you saw Bernie Sanders way up in the polls, right? Way up. Joe Biden was like down with Bloomberg as one of the lowest people in the polls. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Virginia comes around and boom, Joe Biden takes off and wins every state from there on out, right? It was incredibly, everyone knew that the Democratic Party was undermining Bernie once again. And, of course, Bernie being the hack that he is, now that he's a millionaire and completely sold out to the establishment, he goes with it and sides with the Democratic Party, sides with Joe Biden, gets behind him all the way, and, just total political hack, as you would expect. Let's go on. CIA whistleblower Dennis Montgomery turned over a massive cache of illegally harvested surveillance and election data in August 2015 and December 2015 to the FBI and CIA under two immunity agreements that were granted to Montgomery by the Assistant U.S. Attorney Deborah Curtis and FBI General Counsel James Baker. Montgomery testified regarding Scorecard and the Hammer while under oath and while being videotaped at the FBI's secure Washington, D.C. field office SCIF. SCIF is essentially a top secret facility, right? You have to have a high level clearance to get in there. If CIA whistleblower Montgomery had lied about anything, he would be in prison today for lying to the FBI. Montgomery is not in prison. That is true. Whenever you talk to the FBI, you are under oath. That's how they got, that's how they get a lot of people. That's actually how they got Bill Clinton for impeachment and perjury charges. He was talking to the FBI, and he said he did not have sexual intercourse with this woman, right? And turns out he had oral sex, which is technically sexual intercourse, and he had lied, right? You can debate whether or not that he meant to lie or not, but he did because he was under oath, right? Factually, he did. Let's go on. Director of National Intelligence John Negroponte invoked the State Secrets Privilege and the Government Protective Act against Montgomery in order to muzzle Montgomery and prevent him from revealing illegal acts that have been committed by the government. Carletta Wells, a U.S. DOJ litigator and assistant director of the U.S. Department of Justice since the 1990s, told Montgomery that the state secrets privilege and governor protective order cannot be invoked by government officials for the purpose of covering up government malfeasance. If covering up government malfeasance is the government's intention, Wells told Montgomery, the muzzle order is null and void. The Obama administration illegally commandeered the Hammer and Scorecard. They moved the Hammer to Fort Washington, Maryland on February 3rd, 2009. I'd be interested to know how this reporter got this exact date. It is very explicit, right? February 3rd, 2009. It's not a year, it's not a month, it's an exact day. The Obama White House had an encrypted VPN in order to access the Hammer at will. On December 20th, 2015, as part of a summary of information disclosed in the whistleblower tapes, the American Report revealed the following information on the American Report's official Facebook page. Florida voter registration disc removed and new disc inserted for redistricting via the Hammer computer system in Fort Washington, Maryland via Navy intel cover. They stole the Florida election via redistricting in Florida? ? How many other states did Brennan and Clapper do this? Everyone knows that John Brennan and Clapper, I forget Clapper's first name, James Clapper, John Brennan and James Clapper, everyone knows that these people are corrupt. Absolutely corrupt at the highest level, right? We've found out about this during the whole Russian collusion stuff with the CIA and the FBI. That turned out to be a complete hoax, and these people filed FISA warrants that were based on lies, based on a dossier that was essentially funded and paid for by the Clinton Foundation and a hack. So, let's go on. FBI General Counsel James Baker testified under oath before a joint congressional committee stated that he took possession of Dennis Montgomery's evidence. Baker dispatched FBI Special Agents Walter Giardina and William Barnett to the FBI Miami field office in August 2015 to pick up Montgomery's computer hard drives. Baker testified before Congress in October 2018. Quote, I'm turning to the Bureau to describe this. So his client was an individual named Dennis Montgomery, who I believe, to the best of my recollection, he said that he had been a U.S. government contractor and, in the course of that work, had come across evidence of unlawful surveillance by the government of Americans, and including government officials, and wanted to give that information to the Bureau, which eventually did take place. So this is interesting. If I'm reading this correctly, this CIA contractor, Dennis Montgomery, essentially, he had found out about this hammer. He had found out that it was being used to manipulate elections and surveil Americans and also American government officials. And so he whistleblew on the CIA, and in order to make sure that the CIA was held accountable, he told the FBI, assuming that the FBI would then take action against the CIA, right? Little did he know, the FBI is also very corrupt. Baker confirmed that Montgomery had provided his FBI agents with evidence that government officials were conducting unlawful domestic surveillance of Americans, including other government officials. It is of utmost importance to recognize that Robert Mueller's FBI supplied the computers for the hammer, according to Montgomery. Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, so that goes on to the quote about Joseph Stalin about essentially it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the vote, right? So, there you go. there are tons of other articles here about the hammer, right? You can scroll down. There's tons of them. There's been a lot of talk also about an Air Force general who has confirmed this. And we will find him in here. I know he's talked about in this article somewhere. Let's find him real quick. General McInerney. Okay, yeah. So this is the Lieutenant General of the Air Force who also has whistleblown on this. And this guy was on Steve Bannon's show recently, like the night after the election or the day after the election. And he was talking about this program, and Sidney Powell, the lawyer, was also talking about this program, and they were saying that it was used to sway 3% of the vote in multiple swing states. And, Steve Bannon was banned from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, everything during him talking about this, essentially. The leftist media is essentially an arm of the Democratic Party of the government at this point. But I just want to, if you Google this, Hammer and Scorecard, or you go to the AmericanReport.org and look up some stuff, I just want to, you will eventually come across this General McInerney. I believe his first name is Thomas McInerney. You will eventually come across this man's name. And I just want to read his credentials here, because this is not some low-level Air Force guy. This is a guy who served our country for almost 40 years and was in very high positions in the Air Force, some of the highest positions. And he's not some man who's just going to throw it all away by lying. So I just want to read his credentials here, because they're hard to find out there. And I feel like a lot of people who are looking for this stuff won't bother looking that up. So I just want to read his credentials. It doesn't mean that what he's saying is true, but it does mean that he is a reputable individual who has held very honorable positions and powerful positions in this country. Has a lot to lose. A West Point graduate and former Vietnam War Air Force pilot, General McInerney served as the U.S. Air Force Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, the third highest ranking Air Force officer. General McInerney flew over 400 combat missions and flew U.S. military reconnaissance missions during the Cuban Missile Crisis, served as the military assistant to the advisor to the Secretary of Defense on NATO affairs, and was the commander of the Alaskan Air Command, Alaskan NORAD region, and the 11th Air Force. At the Pentagon, General McInerney was responsible for U.S. nuclear weapons. General McInerney is a legendary American military hero and warrior who has dedicated his life and his many talents to defending America. General McInerney was deeply disturbed by President Obama, Brennan's, and Clapper's abuse of the Hammer super surveillance system. After learning about the Hammer, McInerney stated during that March 19, 2017 radio interview, quote, "This is so far greater than Watergate. Watergate was nothing compared to the Hammer. It is very important that this be looked at right now. This is a very serious thing. Everything about the Russians stealing the election is tactical deception." So, yeah, this guy's been out there, but I just wanted to read his credentials a little bit. It goes on to tell his portion of the story and this whole article here, too, and you guys can go to read it. I highly suggest you do. It is this website here, the American Report. They have tons of other articles. They have stuff about Iraq. They have stuff about this Gulf Tanner project, which is also very interesting. Perhaps when all the political topics, kind of simmer down a little bit, maybe when there's nothing going on politically speaking, no breaking news, so to say. I highly doubt that will ever be the case again in this country, but if that ever does come, I will talk about Gulf Tanner at some point in time. I believe it is very interesting. I also plan to do a constitutional series at some point in the near future where I just break down everything in the Constitution and explain it all, because I think everyone needs to know about the Constitution, and, so few people in this country do. But yes, I just wanted to read this, and let me state one more time, what I just read to you is not explicit evidence, right? But it is troublesome, it is scary, and it needs to be looked into. These are reputable people who have a lot to lose, who are whistleblowing on the government. These are people who love America and would only whistleblow on this type of control and fraud, this Hammer and Scorecard program being used against Americans. They would only whistleblow on this if they knew that it was bad for America and essentially a fraud on the American people, right? I'm by no means saying that this was used in the 2020 election, but it is possible. And, it's like something out of a Tom Clancy novel. It makes it hard to believe, but these are reputable people who are saying that this is happening. And I believe that, in the very least, it deserves being looked into, right? But, let's go on. Let's read a little bit of some of the more typical news of the day, and then we'll go on, right? So, I'm not going to read all these things, but essentially, I want to touch on one thing. Let me see if I can find the article here. As you know, there have been tons of lawsuits filed in multiple different swing states, and okay, I can't find the article here, but it's not too big of a deal, right? But essentially, the Biden campaign has been talking to foreign leaders already, essentially trying to, it's common practice, right, when you're president-elect, to be talking to foreign leaders. Here we go. We got the article here from The Hill. We will jump into it. Biden speaks to world leaders following election win. We don't want that. President-elect Joe Biden began having calls with foreign leaders this week as President Trump continues to challenge the results of the election. Biden spoke with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau on Monday and with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Irish Prime Minister Taoiseach Michael Martin on Tuesday. I definitely butchered that pronunciation. The former vice president addressed the calls in an exchange with reporters later Tuesday, saying he communicated to other global leaders that America is back. So, the reason I want to bring this up is because, as you know, the leftists in the media and the Democratic Party went after the Trump campaign, and I forget exactly who it was in the Trump campaign, but they went after high-level Trump campaign officials and tried to put them in jail over violations of the Logan Act. What the Logan Act is essentially it is when an American citizen who is not authorized by the government, when they start talking to foreign powers about American business. This is exactly what the Joe Biden campaign is doing right now. And when the Trump campaign did this in preparation to essentially prepare for taking office, they hammered him and they sent people to jail over the Logan Act. They attempted to send people to jail over the Logan Act. It ruined these people's lives, right? And you are seeing Joe Biden come out and admit right now that he is also violating the Logan Act. I am sure that nothing will be done about this because the Democratic Party is absolutely corrupt and the media will not cover it because they are an arm of the Democratic Party. But I just wanted to point out the blatant hypocrisy and that his campaign is violating the Logan Act right in front of us. We all know, though, that when the Democrats went after the Trump campaign for the Logan Act, that it was just a complete fraudulent claim, fraudulent lawsuit, because the Logan Act has never been used to prosecute anyone until that time. So it's absolutely absurd. And I just wanted to point out the complete hypocrisy. And that's really all I've got for you guys today. As far as the election goes, we're still kind of sitting in the same place that we were last Friday. The Democrats are saying that Joe Biden has won. If you believe all the votes are as they are, right? If you believe that all the votes that have been counted are legal, then yes, Joe Biden has won. But, Joe Biden is up by, I believe, 48,000 votes in Pennsylvania. I believe that if these cases go to the courts and they go all the way up to the Supreme Court, I believe that Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution will rule supreme, and I believe that is enough to flip 48,000 votes in Pennsylvania, because when it comes right down to it, these Democratic cities and these swing states, these Democratic secretaries of state, and essentially these Democratic governors in these swing states, they jumped in, they overrode the state legislatures, and they violated Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution, and they went around them, and they allowed for all these extra rules for voting, meaning you didn't have to have signature checks. If there was something wrong in your ballot, they would help you fill it in, or they would send you another one, and they would decipher what you meant, or, maybe your circle wasn't completely filled in on Biden, so they would decipher what you meant. Maybe you forgot to sign it, and they would sign it for you. Absolutely absurd crap, right? Maybe it was postmarked a day late, and they would backdate it for you. There are credible allegations. There are people who have signed sworn affidavits under perjury, essentially, under threat of perjury. They have signed sworn affidavits saying that these things have happened. There are people who have said that unmarked cars showed up in Philadelphia at 4 a.m. with hundreds of thousands of ballots for Joe Biden. There are ballots that have been reported to have only Joe Biden filled in on them. Large numbers of ballots in the hundreds of thousands. That is unprecedented. Wisconsin showed up for Joe Biden in 90% voter turnout. That is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. Most states are, in the 60 to 70%. Wisconsin does have the highest voter turnout over the years than any other U.S. state, but it is at like 70 to 73%, not 90. I believe the exact number was somewhere around 89%. 89% voter turnout. This is not proof, but it is circumstantial evidence, and it warrants investigation because it smells damn fishy. And, people say, oh, where's the proof? Where's the proof? Well, they weren't letting observers in to a lot of these polling locations to get the proof. That's one of the problems. And, you want proof of the fraud? Well, you got Article 2, Section 1 of the amendment, and you got all of the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution that says the state legislatures make the laws surrounding voting. And these Democratic officials, these Democratic secretaries of state, they went behind their backs. They cherry-picked leftist courts that would allow them to overrule these state legislatures and make their own voting laws, and it accounted for hundreds of thousands of votes, I believe, in many swing states across the country. So, all these people out there saying, oh, you might find fraud, you might find a little bit of fraud, but it won't be enough to change any of the states. Bullshit. I believe that we will have plenty to change some of these states, but I have my doubts that these courts will rule in favor of the Constitution. But they should, because if they don't, and the Democrats end up winning, and Joe Biden takes office, and then maybe they end up winning in Georgia too, because they pull the same shit with this fraud, and they end up winning 2 Senate seats in Georgia, and then they have control of the Senate, and they also have control of the presidency. You know what they're going to do? They're going to pack the court, and they are going to make it an appendage of the Democratic Party, and they're going to use that to subvert the Electoral College and go behind the amendment process and get rid of it, and they're going to start coming for your rights, and the Republicans will never win a presidential election or a Senate election ever again. This will continue to happen forever. This is what happened to California. California used to be a red state. They used to elect red governors, and then after Ronald Reagan, the Democrats said, enough of this, and they took over that state. And now there's not a Republican anywhere. They never win anywhere. It is a blue state. It is a completely, it is insane. It is democratic authoritarianism in California, and that's what they are trying to do to this country, and they're going to do it by voter fraud and packing the courts and adding Supreme Court justices to it that are on the left. That's what's going to happen, and then they're going to come for your rights, and you're never going to be able to be franchised again. You're going to be completely disenfranchised, and you're never going to have a say in any of these presidential elections again. So if that's what you want, vote for these people and keep your mouth shut and don't speak up against them. But I don't want that. And God knows that I bet most Americans do not want that either. If you like what I have to say, like, subscribe. I'm on YouTube almost every day. I'm also on your favorite podcast provider. But thank you very much.